There are many small villages in the Catskill Mountains. One of these is Prattsville, home of Zadok Pratt. Some of you are probably wondering who Zadok Pratt is. Join us and you will soon find out.
Zadok Pratt's father was a tanner, and he learned the trade from him, eventually went into business with his two brothers. When he had saved enough money to start his own business, he supposedly walked over 3 counties looking for the perfect site to build his tannery. Eventually settled in this area and built the tannery across the road from where this house stands now. He served as his own surveyor and architect. The building was a 2-story wooden building. Originally it was 170 feet long by 43 feet wide, and he later expanded it to 553 feet long and 43 feet wide, and eventually it was one of the largest tanneries in the world. They needed the bark from the hemlock trees to make the tannin, which is one of the reasons why he settled in this area. The hemlock trees, when he came here, stood 60 to 100 feet high and 4 feet in diameter, and some were 200 years old or older. And they felled the trees and would pile the bark up in cords. But after the trees were down, they needed to remove the bark with one of these. There are many different types, and it had a name. It was called a spud. And this was used to peel the bark off the trees. It was brought in to the tan yard, as I said, piled up in cords, and it was ground on a mill, on a bark mill with horses, and the hemlock was ground. It went into the leaches, which was mixed with water, and that's where they got the tanning liquors from. They called it liquors, and that was used in the later process to actually tan or cure the hides. The first process, though, you can see in this part of the tannery, was to clean the hides when they came in. Now, there wasn't a readily available source of enough hides in this area for Pratt to tan. So he got hides from New York City area, and the hides were brought in from South America. And they were the largest exporters of meats and hides, and they were brought in and brought down the Hudson into Catskill. And Pratt had to send teamsters up, and it was a 36-mile trip, just one way, and 36 miles back again to bring the hides to the tannery. They were brought in salted. The hides that were found around here were brought in green, and this is called a beam knife. The tooth side was used to remove the hair, and the sharp side, which is still very sharp, was to remove the fattiness still on the hide, or the scud they called it. And this was done over a bench, a half of a tree bench, and it was a very, very rigorous job. It was the hardest job in the tannery to scrape the hair and remove the flesh from the hides before they could be put into the liquors. This was done with water. Sometimes they were pre-soaked with liquors before they were actually put into the tanning vats. After the hides were put into the liquors and brought out, they were brought into the oiling room. And one of Pratt's processes to prepare the hides, or to make better leather, was he piled up the hides after they came out of the liquors and allowed a sort of a mucus to collect on the hides, and then they were brushed, and he said these made the color a lot nicer of the hides, and the hides also more pliable. And he added a little bit of oil to them, and then the hides were hung up to dry, and you could see that in the top of the tannery. This had to be done very, very slowly. They said just a sufficient amount of air to prevent the edges of the hides from forming mold. And they were dried very, very slowly and hung up there anywhere from 7 to 10 days. Then they were brought down to the finishing room, and they were put on tables and rolled over with roller balls to close the grain of the hide of the leather. And then it was ready to sell and brought back into the city, into the New York swamp area.
and didn't keep Tchaikovsky from composing Swan Lake. He didn't stop Van Gogh from painting sunflowers, or Julius Caesar from ruling the Roman Empire. And having epilepsy hasn't kept these people from reaching their goals, meeting their responsibilities, doing their job. If you think epilepsy stands in the way of job performance, you're missing out on some very good people. I know. I have epilepsy myself. Get the facts. Call the Epilepsy Foundation of America, 1-800-EFA-1000.
It's easy to think one person can't make a difference, but 200 million people can. If every one of us volunteered just 5 hours a week to the causes we care about, if we all donated just 5% of what we earn, there'd be almost no limit to what we can do. Just 5 hours, just 5%. When you think about it, it's not that much to give. And what we could get back is immeasurable.
Here is the house as Colonel Pratt built it in the 1820s. Standing at the right of the house, where the post office now stands, was his bank. He had his own bank. You probably have heard about that. He made money. He actually made money. He made pieces of money, paper money. Then in the 1850s, he wanted to be more modern, and so he changed it to this period, which is what you're seeing now. So when the building was restored in the 70s, it was restored to this era.
We're here at Pratt Rock Park right now, and these about 20-so acres was given to the town of Prattsville on October 7th in 1843. The carvings that we're going to walk up to see are about 400 feet from the road surface. It's about a half-mile serpentine path, quite steep, but worth the trip up to see the rocks. The story about the rocks has a lot of different variations to it, but basically what happened, there was a story of a stonecutter walking through town, and his name was Andrew Pierce, and he was walking through town, and he needed a night's lodging or some work, and Pratt believed that one should work for one's keep, and told him that he would give him a night's lodging, but to go to the end of town, there was a big boulder, and he said, carve a bust of my face or a horse on that rock. The story goes either way. So the stonecutter went down to the end of town and went to work carving this horse or a bust of Colonel Pratt. And out came a farmer named John Brandow and said to the stonecutter, "What are you doing?" And he told them that what he was setting out to do, and apparently this gentleman didn't like Pratt too much and told him to get off of his property. Pratt went back and relayed the story. The stonecutter went back and relayed the story to Pratt, and Pratt said, "Well, then go to the end of town, and I own all the rocks above town, and carve the bust of my face up there where everyone can see it." So that's what the stonecutter set out to do. Pratt, when he talks about his life, he was quoted as saying many times, "Let the rocks tell the story."
Prattsville, New York owes much of its proud history to Colonel Zadok Pratt. The Pratt Museum, which was his home, will be celebrating his 200th birthday this summer. The museum is open Wednesdays through Sundays, Memorial Day to Columbus Day, and the Pratt Park is open all year round. Admission to both is free.